had the idea to make this video after one of my self-healing consults this morning with one of my clients, and we were talking about boundaries and why that is actually the opposite of being invulnerable. And I made reference to my past in very volatile relationships that had toxic elements. There was some narcissism, there was some abuse. It was an unsafe environment in which to be vulnerable. And when I was in that situation, I numbed myself. I managed to create some self-protective walls because your survival instinct knows, okay, this is not a really safe place to fully open up, but if I can remain calloused and if I can keep those inner walls up, then I will not be crushed by this dramatic intensity between me and this other person. So in those years, I managed to freeze up or, be in deer in the headlights or whatever the coping mechanism is to detach and remain invulnerable. Now, being invulnerable actually goes with bad boundaries, because when you're invulnerable, you don't need to maintain boundaries as much because nothing is affecting you. When you're allowing yourself to feel, that's when the alarm bells go off about, geez, this does not feel good. This does not feel right. Oh, this really hurts. And then the impetus for action can come from that. So when I made the decision to distance myself from relationships that made me feel uncomfortable, not respected, just undervalued or ill-treated or whatever, or just that were very, incompatible and unhealthy for me and the other person, when I distanced myself from those relationships, I gradually experienced this melting by surrounding myself with people that seemed to understand me, that respect me, that loved me for who I am. By also taking care of animals. I was dog sitting at the end of my last unhealthy relationship, and that helped me open my heart again, and animals have continued to play that role. I experienced this kind of softening, and the more I had that kind of softening and that increased openness, the more it felt unpalatable to engage with people that just were not on the same frequency, who didn't have that kind of natural compatibility, people that I would be left feeling uncomfortable or drained, or just didn't really have a natural yearning to spend time for. So I'm grateful to my toxic relationships in the past for teaching me how to disconnect and detach from dynamics that just don't work, without blaming it on the other person. They just don't work for either party. It's oil and water. And I did learn that skill, and I learned that even if you like certain elements about a person and there are certain good things about the relationship, if the relationship fundamentally is one that continues to destabilize you and make you lose connection with your center, and you're feeling insecure about yourself, or you're feeling emotionally volatile after, or it puts into question your intuition and your desires and your dreams every time you spend time with them, that is generally going to be a relationship that will not suddenly become more compatible for you. There's like a fundamental discord between both people's point of views and their trajectories that they want to take and their vision for themselves in their life. Or maybe just on a chemical level, two personalities that don't mix. I don't think people change that much. So I think that if you've been burned from someone enough times, the solution will not be some cathartic resolution through a conversation or just taking another stab at it. I think that the solution is to detach and take distance and, send love and respect from a distance without needing to actually interact. So that is where you take active distance. Now, how does setting boundaries for relationships that are unsustainable foster intimacy? Well, after I'd had this session and I was already thinking about these themes, I saw Kate Thomas, she posted a quote that said, "Good boundaries increases intimacy," something along those lines. And that felt like a real confirmation for me to discuss this theme, to elaborate on it more, because that's exactly what I was saying to my client in this session as well. We only have a certain amount of energy to give and a certain amount of emotional bandwidth to share and connect. And if we disconnect from those relationships that drain our reserves, that feel destabilizing or discredit us on a kind of fundamental level, then we have more emotional, psychic, psychological, physical availability to be present and to be vulnerable and to truly connect with those that we do choose to have in our lives. It doesn't mean we're not going to have to set boundaries in our good relationships, but the work that we're doing to be open, to show up, to let ourselves be affected, to really negotiate our limits, our expectations with the other person's, that's a constant, beautiful dance that allows us to grow and is not the same thing as a relationship that's consistently destabilizing. So by creating separation and distance from the destabilizing relationships, we have so much more to offer our central and chosen and even new relationships that we choose to foster care within. So I don't like this association of boundaries with being cold and aloof and nonchalant or ambivalent, like, oh, I'm just not going to let anything affect me, I am Teflon. And that is like the opposite of boundaries. Like when we are invulnerable, there is nothing for us to negotiate. Like we don't have to have nuance and say like, yes, I want to do this, no, I don't want to do this. We don't get to work on our desires and preferences and needs and how we want to have a schedule and how we want to manage our energy and how much time we want to spend doing this or that. We don't get to know ourselves when we're invulnerable because we're just detached. And by creating good boundaries, we get real intimacy because there we're working with the people that we're close to have these kind of active negotiations. I mean, sometimes you don't have to have a negotiation. It's just a natural compatibility, but that is a kind of exchange that fosters growth. So in relationships with healthy boundaries, hopefully, I think the majority of the time you get along. There's like a natural understanding, a natural complicity, there's mutual respect, understanding for the path that each person is on, natural likability between the two people. I think that should be the baseline. But then of course there are going to be moments where you're not in the same rhythm, you don't have the same goals, you don't have the same vision, and that is where we get to work on being flexible and porous and questioning ourselves and being in dialogue. And I think that is where the real work happens. And if you're trying to put in that real work with someone that just sucks your life force away, you're never going to get that satisfying resolution. So we put up boundaries with relationships that are not regenerative so that we can deepen our intimacy and connections with relationships that are, and even actually give through acts of service in ways that we choose. Like when I was in abusive relationships, I was just in survival mode. I didn't have anything else to give anybody. And this is not only romantic, I have a lot of cases of professional relationships like this as well with superiors. When I stopped working for people, stopped dating people, and stopped having friendships that were sapping my resources, that kind of devalued my core ethos, I got centered, I got grounded, and I had a lot more to give the people that I wanted to have in my life, but I also had more to give strangers, people living on the street, people who have, disability, doing an act of service, teaching someone who's having a hard time in their life meditation. We can be so much more deliberate about how we give when we're not going down in a sinking ship with someone and trying to give into a black hole that will never know how to care for us back. And so this is for all of you that might have confusion about, seeing having boundaries as a way of being disconnected and not letting anything affect you. On the contrary, we have boundaries so that we can open our heart, so that it's safe to do that and really choose where to target our precious, nurturing, loving, and abundant energy. So that's it. I hope it's some food for thought for you. And again, if ever you want to work with me one-on-one, it's my favorite way to work these days with Tour de Soul. I have self-healing consults and lots of different bundle options available. A lot of the clients I meet with weekly, and it's just very beautiful and empowering to see the progression week to week in tangible ways. And I look forward to working with you. If that's the case, you can book one of those on my website and check me out on Instagram, on TikTok, and all of the places. And I'll see you very shortly.